الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for inviting us to Islam. We ask Him to give us the knowledge, the persistence, the staying power to fulfill the privilege of being Muslim. We also thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the grace, for all the unity and all the teachings that He has set at our disposal. Today, inshallah, let's speak about education. A very, very critical topic in Islam, education. Number one, how did the education story begin in Islam? How did the education story begin? The creator of the universe began the communication with humanity with one word. That word was Iqra, read. He could have started this conversation with many words. He could have started the conversation with Allah. He could have started the conversation with salam, with salah, but he chose Iqra. Why? What is the significance of Iqra? Read. Reading is the first step in the ladder of success. The first step in the ladder of success. Reading leads to enlightenment. When you are enlightened, you recognize Allah's gifts. The moment one recognizes Allah's gifts, the doors of gratitude open. Gratitude is reflected by obedience to Allah. Obedience is the highway that leads to paradise. So you see how reading starts a chain of events which ultimately lead to Jannah. At this point, I need to emphasize two very important considerations, two important reminders. Number one, A. Here's some very sad news. Despite the fact that Allah said read, do you know that nearly 1 billion people entered the 21st century unable to read or write? 1 billion people, 1,000 million, cannot read or write. 1 in 7 people cannot read or write. What will we say when Allah asks, what did you do about that tragedy? We are all accountable. The aspect of accountability should never be underplayed. Allah will ask, what did you do about this tragedy? I worry about this accountability. Here are a few things that I might say. Oh Allah, I educated my children as best as I could. Oh Allah, I volunteered to teach over weekends. Oh Allah, I contributed to the education of less fortunate children. What will you say? Remember, accountability, my respected Muslims, is a part of this deen. B, the second very important consideration I want to emphasize. The designer of mankind commanded humanity to read. Nowhere in this command does it imply that women should not read. Nowhere does it imply that women should not seek enlightenment. The tendency in certain circles to deny women education is rebellion against Allah's command. It is a typical example of tribalism distorting truth. Please remember that. let's go on with the second point. What guidance did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam offer as far as education is concerned? قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم طلب العلم فريضة على كل مسلم. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the pursuit of knowledge is compulsory upon every Muslim, every believer. This requires energy. No couch potatoes, please. We cannot sit on the couch and eat popcorn. We have to do mental gymnastics. We have to burn the midnight oil. We have to do brain push-ups. That's what this tells us to do. It's not a comfortable survival technique. It is get out there and do something. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so passionate about education, about advancement in knowledge. He would swim against the tide to make things happen. There are two examples where you see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam opposing the tide for the sake of education, advancement in knowledge. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he saw great promise in a young man called Zayd bin Thabit. May Allah be pleased with him. And he asked Zayd bin Thabit as his first assignment to learn Hebrew. Within a very short while, Zayd bin Thabit mastered Hebrew. And he became the official translator between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Jewish tribes around Medina. My little mind would say, why learn the language of the Jews? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is looking further ahead. Zayd's next assignment was to learn Persian. And this further enhanced the Muslims' ability to communicate with the surrounding people. Zayd went on to learn 3 more languages in a very short while. May Allah be pleased with you. You think this was a waste of time? You think this was throwing away good time? Please tell me, how would you communicate? How would you establish alliances? How would you negotiate treaties? How would you invite to Islam if you cannot speak the language of the people? In fact, the aspect of accountability comes in again. Wouldn't it be amazing to say to Allah, oh Allah, I invited them to Islam and I invited them in their own language. My respected Muslims, we got to think big. We cannot think small. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not stifle our thinking. He asked us to expand. Here's the other example. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam devised a unique action plan to educate children and free prisoners. He struck a deal with the Badr prisoners. He said to them, you can win your freedom if each of you teaches 10 children to read and write. In a very short time, many children mastered reading and writing, and many prisoners returned to their beloved. You see the definition of win-win? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was practicing win-win hundreds of years ago. Many would ask, what can these pagans teach these children? Keep them away from these impressionable young minds. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam disagrees. He says, wholesome knowledge is too valuable to squander. Take it from wherever you can find it. Many of these prisoners had raised their swords against Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet he did not hesitate to set them free for knowledge, for education. Today, if somebody draws a stick figure of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we lose our composure. We lose it. We cannot control ourselves. we got to return to the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's where we should get our signal from, not from the internet, and definitely not from those who establish shallow thinking. Now let's dive a little deeper. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to us, the pursuit of knowledge is compulsory upon every Muslim. In this context, what does knowledge mean? Sure, knowledge includes the Quran and the Sunnah. There's no discussion about that. But it also includes all branches of learning, which helps us establish and glorify this great deen of Islam. It includes all branches of learning, which helps us glorify Allah. Here's what Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَتَذَكَّرُ أُولُو الْأَلْبَابِ. It is those who are gifted with understanding that receive the message. Here's how it works. A person of understanding, he sees the creative genius of Allah in every dimension. He looks at the sun and he says, Allahu Akbar. He looks at the force of gravity and he sees Allah's hand. He looks at the love of a mother for her child and he says, Subhanallah. He looks at chemical reactions and he understands the creative genius of Allah. The shallow mind, the tiny mind, he looks at the sun, he complains about the heat, and he reaches for SP75 sunscreen lotion. My respected Muslims, we have to think big. We have to take our drive from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the authentic source of knowledge. Most importantly, knowledge, it helps us build the critical thinking skills which interpret the instructive power of the Quran. It helps us understand, this critical thinking skill helps us understand Allah's communication. Here are several examples. In Surah 25, Ayah 53, Allah tells us about an invisible barrier. He speaks about the pycnocline zone, an area of high density difference between salt water and fresh water, which keeps them from mixing. Even though they are in intimate communication with each other. Salt water and fresh water are in intimate mixture. They are communicating all the time. Yet Allah tells us about this barrier that keeps them from mixing in river mouths. Allah says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي مَرَجَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ هَذَا عَذْبٌ فُرَاتٌ وَهَذَا مِلْحٌ أُجَاجٌ وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَهُمَا بَرْزَخًا وَحِجْرًا مَحْجُورًا. It is He who has set free the two bodies of flowing water, one palatable and sweet, and the other one salt and bitter. Yet has He placed a barrier between them which keeps them from mixing. In other words, this pycnocline zone, this barrier is always there, adjusting, changing, so that these bodies of water do not mix. Now for the critical thinking area. When we raise children, the parent is the pycnocline barrier. The parent is the person who adjusts, anticipates, looks ahead, looks behind, and keeps evil from mixing with purity. My respected Muslims, look at the example that Allah gives us. Look at what He wants us to think about. And if we stifle our mental capacities, we do not get the Quran's communications power. Here's another example. In Surah Tawbah, verse 122, Allah says, He gives us a secret. He tells us how to deploy an army. Allah says to us, nor should the believers all go forth together. If a contingent from each expedition remained behind, they could devote themselves to studies in religion and admonish the people when they return that thus they will be able to keep themselves from evil. In other words, this brings us face to face with the negative consequences of war. Soldiers return with psychological and emotional injury, which has to be treated with gentle spiritual counseling. Today, the world has got to realize that post-traumatic stress disorder is real. It exists. Allah told us about this over 1400 years ago. My respected Muslims, critical thinking enables us to understand Allah's message, the power of communication that Allah sets us to understand. In Surah 39, verse 42, Allah says, He tells us about sleep. But if we look critically, the message is much wider than sleep. Here's the message. Allahu yatawaffa al-anfusa hina mawtiha wallati lam tamut fi manamiha wa yumsiku allati qada alayha al-mawta wa yursilu al-ukhra ila ajalin musamma. It is Allah that takes the souls of men at death, and those that die not, He takes during their sleep. Those on whom He has passed the decree of death, He keeps from returning to life, but the rest He sends back to their bodies for an appointed time. What is the message? When we think of sleep, we think of rest, we think of repair, we think of regeneration. But more importantly, Allah reminds us, every time we sleep, we disappear into the unknown. We simulate death. We practice death. We go on this unknown journey, just as one day we will go never to return again. So every time we sleep, it's not just regeneration, it's Allah telling us, you are not invincible. Embrace righteousness. Repel evil. Prepare for your final journey. Invest in the pension plan of the next life. My respected Muslims, if we don't understand, if we don't educate ourselves, how do we receive these messages? We've got to think big. We've got to stop this little tribalism thinking. We have to step beyond that. That's how we survive today's trials. That's how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam survived his trials. Number 3, if someone does half a job, would you say job well done? Not likely. You know, most of us parents, we have a disconnect with the education process of today. Most of us believe, and I point first at myself, most of us believe that the moment my son or daughter enters an Ivy League college, my job is done. I'm sorry. That's half a job. That's half the education equation. Sure, he or she is going to have a wonderful profession in this life. He or she is going to have a great lifestyle in this life. But it is half a job because it ignores a very specific instruction from Allah. And what is that instruction? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Oh, you who believe, protect yourself and your family from the fire of Jahannam. To address this second half of the equation, I cannot delegate my responsibility to Oxford University. I cannot delegate my responsibility to an Ivy League college. I have to be industriously running a practical workshop. What does that workshop entail? I have got to read Salah with my children. I have got to read the Quran with my children. I have got to feed the hungry with my children. I have got to visit the sick with my children. You see, my respected Muslims, I have to teach my children how to use the instruments of paradise. I cannot leave that to Princeton University. That is exactly why Allah says, وَالْبَلَدُ الطَّيِّبُ يخرج نباته بإذن ربه والذي خبث لا يخرج إلا نكدا. From the land that is good and fertile springs up that which is wonderful by the will of its cherisher. But from the land that is miserable springs up nothing but that which is miserable. Here's where the buck stops. The buck stops here, my respected Muslims. If I am not running this workshop, this practical workshop, half the education equation is not being fulfilled. The best education, number 4, the best education seldom happens in a classroom. The best education, the best lessons are taught spontaneously as life unfolds. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was a master spontaneous teacher. He could find a life lesson in an unfolding situation. Here are 2 examples. This is dinner table talk. We must talk these stories at the dinner table. It's so easy. Here's 2 examples. Abu Dujana, may Allah be pleased with him. Abu Dujana, he was a courageous fighter. He was a very powerful fighter. He used to, they described him by saying that he used to boast during war. He used to swagger during war. Before the Battle of Uhud, he took a red band and he draped it around his head. And he drew his sword and he began to walk among the warriors with pride. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, standing at a distance, he saw this and he said, this is the type of walking that Allah hates, except in this situation. My respected Muslims, we are in that situation today. We should not be apologetic for being Muslims. We should come to the masjids with confidence. We should feed the hungry with confidence. We should visit the sick with absolute confidence. We should be proud that we have been invited by Allah. There's a second example. A very, very thin person, he passed by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his companions. And someone said, wish that he had become thin in the service of Allah. What a teaching moment. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam saw this moment and he said, if he is struggling and striving to feed his elderly parents, he is on the path of Allah. If he is struggling and striving to feed his children, he is on the path of Allah. If he is struggling and striving so that he does not have to beg, he is on the path of Allah. My respected Muslims, if you don't see me here, don't judge. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you never know what is happening behind the scenes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to educate ourselves. We ask Him to give us the ability to think big, to look at the examples that come solely from Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not be distracted by street talk. Wa sallallahu alaihi Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وذنوب والدينا ومشايخنا وجميع المؤمنين أجمعين.
ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم اغفر لأهل القبور من المسلمين والمسلمات والمؤمنين والمؤمنات، ارفع لهم الدرجات وكفر عنهم السيئات يا رب العالمين. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون.